If an alien astronomer arrived on Earth, they would immediately understand how we measure time. They would see our planet spinning on its axis, there's a day. They'd see us orbiting the sun, there's a year. But if they looked at our calendars, one thing would completely baffle them: the week. Why on earth do humans group their days into sets of 7? Where is the physical evidence for it in nature? The answer is there isn't any. So who decided a week should be exactly 7 days? Think about it. Most of our timekeeping is dictated by the actual physical mechanics of the universe. A day, that's the time it takes for the Earth to rotate once on its axis. A year, that's the time it takes for the Earth to orbit the sun. Even a month is roughly based on the time it takes the moon to orbit the Earth. But a week has zero physical basis in nature. It doesn't align perfectly with the solar year or the lunar month. It is a completely artificial human invention. So who decided a week should be exactly 7 days? Why not 5? Why not 10? To find the answer, we have to travel back over 4,000 years to the cradle of civilization, ancient Mesopotamia and the empire of the Babylonians. The Babylonians were master astronomers. Long before the invention of telescopes, they mapped the heavens with startling mathematical precision. For them, the sky was a giant billboard where the gods wrote their intentions. And the biggest, brightest sign in the night sky was the moon. The Babylonians tracked what we call the synodic month, the time it takes for the moon to go through all its phases from new moon to full moon and back again. This takes roughly 29.53 days. Now, dealing with 29.5 days is mathematically annoying. But the Babylonians noticed that this lunar cycle could be divided into 4 distinct visual phases: the waxing crescent, the half moon, the full moon, and the waning half. If you divide 29.5 days by 4, you get about 7.38 days per phase. The Babylonians, needing a practical calendar for society, rounded this down to 7. They declared the 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th days of the lunar month to be holy days. On these days, certain activities were strictly forbidden. The king wasn't allowed to eat cooked meat, change his clothes, or ride in his chariot. It was considered a day of bad luck or a day of rest to appease the gods. But there was a catch. Because the lunar month is 29.5 days long, a 7-day cycle doesn't fit perfectly into it. So at the end of every month, the Babylonians had 1 or 2 extra days before the new moon appeared and they could restart the cycle. Their week was not a continuous, unbroken chain. To get the unbroken 7-day week we know today, we need more than just the moon. We need the stars. When ancient astronomers looked at the night sky, they noticed that almost all the stars remained fixed in their constellation. They rotated together like a giant painted ceiling. But 7 specific celestial bodies did not. They wandered across the background of the static stars. The Greeks later called them planets, meaning wanderers. To the naked ancient eye, there were exactly 7 of these wanderers: the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. For ancient cultures, these weren't just rocks or balls of gas in space. They were living, breathing gods. And because there were exactly 7 of them visible in the sky, the number 7 became imbued with deep, mystical power. During the Hellenistic period, as the astronomical knowledge of the Babylonians mixed with the culture of the Greeks and the Egyptians, an intricate astrological system was born. Astrologers believed that each of these 7 celestial gods took turns ruling over the hours of the day. They ordered these planets based on how fast they appeared to move across the sky, from the slowest to the fastest. This was known as the Chaldean order: Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon. This exact astronomical math is how the days of our week got their order. Astrologers assigned a planet to every hour of the day. Let's look at how this breaks down. On the first day of the week, the very first hour is ruled by Saturn. Therefore, the entire day is dedicated to Saturn. Welcome to Saturn Day or Saturday. Now count 24 hours through the Chaldean order. Hour 1 is Saturn, 2 is Jupiter, 3 is Mars, 4 is the Sun, 5 is Venus, 6 is Mercury, 7 is the Moon. For hour 8, you start the list over again. If you keep cycling through this list of 7 planets, the 24th hour of Saturday falls on Mars. Therefore, the very first hour of the next day falls on the next planet in line, the Sun. So day 2 becomes Sunday. Count another 24 hours. The first hour of day 3 lands on the Moon. Moon Day, which became Monday. Count another 24 hours. Day 4 lands on Mars. Day 5 lands on Mercury. Day 6 lands on Jupiter. Day 7 lands on Venus. By tracking the heavens, astrologers created an unbroken, repeating 7-day cycle. This was the planetary week, and it became wildly popular across the Mediterranean world, used by common people for casting horoscopes and planning daily life. But astronomy and astrology are only half the story. The other half is religion. While the Greeks and Babylonians were looking at the planets, the ancient Hebrews were developing a completely different 7-day cycle in the Levant. According to the book of Genesis in the Hebrew Bible, God created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th. This established the Sabbath, a day of rest and worship. Unlike the Babylonian week, which was interrupted by the physical phases of the moon, the Jewish week was an unbroken, continuous machine. It did not care what the moon was doing or where the planets were. It ticked on 1 through 7 forever. For centuries, these two seven-day cycles, the astrological planetary week and the Jewish religious week, coexisted side by side, slowly influencing one another. But they weren't yet the global standard. Enter the Roman Empire. Early Romans didn't use a seven-day week at all. They used an 8-day cycle called the nundinal cycle, which was essentially a schedule for market days. Farmers would work in the fields for 7 days and go to the city market on the 8th. But as the Roman Empire expanded, it absorbed millions of Jews, early Christians, and devotees of Hellenistic astrology. The Roman 8-day market week began to violently clash with the 7-day planetary and religious weeks. It was a calendar nightmare. Finally, in the year 321 AD, Emperor Constantine the Great stepped in. Constantine was the first Christian Roman emperor, but he also ruled over millions of pagans who worshipped the sun god Sol Invictus. Constantine needed a way to unify his sprawling empire, so he issued a historic decree. He officially established the 7-day week as the civil standard for the Roman Empire. Furthermore, he declared that the first day of the week, dies solis or Sunday, would be a mandatory day of rest. This was a brilliant political masterstroke. For Christians, Sunday was the Lord's day, the day of Christ's resurrection. For pagans, Sunday was the day of the sun god. By making Sunday the official day of rest, Constantine successfully married the astrological planetary week with the Judeo-Christian religious week. The 7-day week was officially locked in. As the Roman Empire eventually collapsed, the 7-day week survived, deeply embedded in the Christian church. As Christianity spread across Europe, it took the week with it. The Romance languages like Spanish, French, and Italian kept the original Roman planetary name. In Spanish, Monday is lunes from Luna, the moon, Tuesday is Marts, Mars, Wednesday is Midicoles, Mercury, Thursday is Juves, Jupiter, and Friday is Virens, Venus. But what about English? English is a Germanic language. When the Germanic tribes adopted the Roman week, they didn't want to use Roman gods. So they swapped out the Roman deities for their own matching Norse and Germanic gods. Mars, the Roman god of war, was swapped for the Norse god of combat too, hence Tuesday, Tuesday. Mercury was swapped for the chief Germanic god Woden, giving us Woden's day, Wednesday. Jupiter, the Roman god of thunder, became the Norse god of thunder, Thor. This gave us Thor's day, Thursday. Venus, the goddess of love, was swapped for the Norse goddess Frigg, giving us Frigg's day, Friday. Saturn, the sun, and the moon managed to keep their original celestial names in English: Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Over the last 2 millennia, various groups have tried to kill the 7-day week, and they have failed miserably. During the French Revolution in 1793, the new government introduced a 10-day week to completely sever ties with the church and base time on the decimal system. It was a disaster. Citizens were exhausted from working 9 days before finally getting a day off. Even draft horses collapsed in the streets from overwork. Napoleon Bonaparte eventually abolished it 12 years later. In 1929, the Soviet Union tried a different approach. To maximize factory production, they introduced a 5-day continuous work week. Workers were given different staggered days off so the factories could keep running 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. While production briefly rose, it completely destroyed family and social life. A husband might have Tuesday off while his wife had Thursday off. Friends could never see each other. It was intensely unpopular and was completely scrapped by 1940. It turns out, a week of 5 or 6 days of work, followed by 1 or 2 days of rest, is the ultimate human Goldilocks zone. It's just the right balance of economic productivity and physical recovery. So the next time you find yourself counting down the days to the weekend, take a moment to look up. The weekend you are craving is the result of ancient Babylonians watching the phases of the moon. It's the result of Greek mathematicians calculating the speed of wandering planets. It's the legacy of Jewish theology and Roman imperial law.